On June 19, 1865, slaves in Texas were the last to learn of their emancipation following the defeat of the Confederate States of America. In African American communities throughout the United States, this good news of liberation to the captives is still celebrated as Juneteenth. Juneteenth became a federal holiday in 2021. The Holy Gospel according to Luke, the 8th chapter.
Glory to you, Lord.
Then Jesus and his disciples arrived at the country of the Gerasenes, which is opposite Galilee. As he stepped out on land, a man of the city who had demons met him. For a long time, he had worn no clothes, and he did not live in a house, but in the tombs. When he saw Jesus, he fell down before him and shouted at the top of his voice, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you, do not torment me." For Jesus had commanded the unclean spirit to come out of the man. For many times it had seized him. He was kept under guard and bound with chains and shackles. But he would break the bonds and be driven by the demon into the wilds. Jesus then asked him, "What is your name?" He said, "Legion," for many demons had entered him. They begged him not to order them to go back into the abyss. Now there on the hillside, a large herd of swine was feeding. And the demons begged Jesus to let them enter these. So he gave them permission. Then the demons came out of the man and entered the swine, and the herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake and was drowned. When the swineherd saw what had happened, they ran off and told it in the city and in the country. Then people came out to see what had happened. And when they came to Jesus, they found the man from whom the demons had gone, sitting at the feet of Jesus, clothed and in his right mind. And they were afraid. Those who had seen it told them how the one who had been possessed by demons had been healed. Then all the people of the surrounding country of the Gerasenes asked Jesus to leave them, for they were seized with great fear. So he got into the boat and returned. The man from whom the demons had gone begged that he might be with him, but Jesus sent him away, saying, "Return to your home and declare how much God has done for you." So he went away, proclaiming throughout the city how much Jesus had done for him. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Christ.
Please be seated. The Gospel acclamation in our liturgy comes before we read the Gospel, which is good news. It can, however, come whenever good news is to be told about anyone, for anyone, by the grace of God. Which is why today it is appropriate, maybe even necessary, to talk about Juneteenth in the sermon and to talk about the month of Pride in the Stonewall Inn in a sermon. It is good news to talk about mental illness in a sermon, and it is good news to talk about other kinds of disabilities. It is good news because talking about things out loud with people, you notice I say people, not one person in a darkened corner of a restaurant with your mask. It's important to talk about hard topics with people because that is how we together understand better how to include them, how to help them find their freedom. And in so doing, we become more free ourselves. I want to look at today's gospel with you. You'll probably want to have it in front of you. And I want to start from the bottom, in which the people are afraid. Jesus has healed this man filled with demons so many, they are called legion. And the response of the community is to ask Jesus to leave, for they were filled with great fear. But before that is where I came up with this swine song. So a swan song is often a musician, sometimes a performing artist, maybe it might even be an author. It's their last big thing that they create, that they produce before they die. It's called a swan song. And I read this lesson about 20 times this week, and the thing that I kept coming back to was this question. Were the swine martyrs? Why didn't the swine get a say when the demons asked to go into the sign? Doesn't it seem like swine might be just a notch above a demon in the pecking order? So the demons get to call the shots here? And ask not to be thrown back into the abyss, which is, of course, where the pigs then escorted them to? You can't help but hear it. Something like, don't throw me into that briar patch, you know? Were the demons tricking Jesus? And were the swines noble martyrs? Or were they just convenient and dirty, such that no one would eat them? No one really noticed them until the demons drove them over the cliff, and suddenly they became more valuable because they were no more. It's a very odd twist in the story, don't you think? And that's why I came up with this idea. It was their swine song. Because Jesus cast the demons out following the demons' request. They went into the pigs. We don't know if the pigs had the ability to block, to put a force field around them and said, not in this pig body. We don't know. But the pigs were the one that actually escorted the demons off the premises. It's an interesting thought, don't you think? And then that bounces us back up to the very beginning. And so, as Jesus stepped out on land, a man of the city who had demons met him. For a long time he had worn no clothes. He did not live in a house, but in the tombs. Let's stop right there. He didn't live in a house, but in the tombs. So he was what we would call today homeless, houseless, had housing insecurity. Right. But at this time, they also decided that he had demons. Why? Many times it had seized him. He was kept under guard and bound with chains and shackles. He would break the bonds and be driven by the demon into the wilds. Oh, it was his behavior. He would shout out and make people so uncomfortable. And oh my gosh, did you catch that he was naked? Right? So he doesn't have a home. He lives in the tombs. He's naked. He shouts out at inconvenient times. They shackle him. He breaks the shackles, which would mean he would be frighteningly strong. And then the demons take over and chase him farther into the wilderness. There is no denying this man is possessed. What it doesn't say, though, is that he's mentally ill. And that's important. Because for years, decades, centuries maybe, pastors and preachers of all denominations have interpreted this to mean he was mentally ill. The man was mentally ill. Now, I don't know about you. I have known a lot of mentally ill people. Lots. I have this personal theory that you need not agree with, but I think it's a spectrum. And everybody's on the spectrum somewhere. And some people are down here. They're naked and screaming and being driven into the wilderness by forces not their own. Right? And some of them are down here. They just have to go back into the house 3 times every single time they leave before they get in the car. Now, sometimes it may be because they forgot something legitimately, okay? Sometimes it may be that they think they forgot something, but they have to go stand where they were standing before they went out the door to know for sure if it was they forgot something. Sometimes people do it because they do it, right? And if you are one of those people, you might not make a production about it. I mean, if you only do it at your cousin's house at Christmas, probably nobody notices, and you can keep that under wraps. We don't have to put you out by the tombs, we just aren't going to talk about it. Right? So that might be on this end of the spectrum. And then if you step a few more feet in, you might find things like, I don't know, things in the kitchen that are alphabetized, a list on the refrigerator of every leftover, when it was put in there, when it will expire, what kind of container it is in a little box so you can check when you throw it out. I rest my case. Some people would say this is just organized. You could take a tip about this, Pastor Marie. Organization is a good thing. Some others might say, are you kidding me? Are you setting me up to fail? There's no way that some people will be able to respond to that. What some people might do is go and look at the list and then walk away and go out and get a hamburger at McDonald's because that's too much to even process in terms of what should I eat, right? I think it's something like that. We are also this month commemorating Pride, which I'm sure this group knows, started at the Stone Wall Inn in Greenwich Village when the homosexuals, the gay people, the trans people that were partying in the Stonewall Inn, and the police came to raid them, and they decided, no, we are who we are, and it is really okay. And you don't have the right to arrest us and beat us just because of who we are. And they fought back. That began this first tradition. And pride parades, when they said, no, we are people too. And we do not consider this an illness such that we need to be rounded up by police, put in shackles, and put somewhere where you don't have to ever see us. And so you see how those things come together. And at the same time, it's Juneteenth. Tell me, why do you think Texas took so long? I think it was a couple years before telling the slaves the good news that they were free. Any idea? Maybe the people in power in Texas were more comfortable with the slaves being in chains than being unshackled, and who knows what they'll do then. What they did when they find out, the slaves in Texas, some of them stayed because they were comfortable doing what they were doing, and they saw their master, as it were, as their employer. Some left to go look for family members they've got separated from along the way of slavery. And others moved north to start new lives. So they took 3 different trajectories. There's a book called Far from the Tree. Sally Cope bought this one for me, and I'm just now beginning to get into it. Far from the Tree is about all kinds of differences in people and how we all have elements of these things that manifest in children and grandchildren. Sometimes we see them more in the children than we see them ourselves. Far from the Tree makes a case for society to be at its best in terms of being inclusive and loving, compassionate,
and helpful to families and individuals with a wide variety of things that set them apart and make some people in society afraid of them. This book makes a case that we are not so different, and that if we looked more closely, we might find that by finding ways to include these people that we sometimes try not to see, we are blessed and their families are blessed, and they receive bits of healing. I want to read to you, though, the table of contents, because when I was first given this book, I was told it was about all kinds of mental illness. In fact, the author, Andrew Solomon's first book, or book before this one, was called The Noonday Demon, and it was about depression. Table of contents for this book, these are the chapters: son, deaf, dwarfs, Down syndrome, autism, schizophrenia, disability, prodigies, rape, crime, transgender, father. Now, did anyone hear something in that list that made them think, wait, that's not mental illness? Anybody? Yes, right, exactly. But the truth is that our society, by and large, unless this is your passion, unless this is your profession, unless you've received lots of education about this, tend to treat all the people on that list a little bit the same. If you find out that someone you know has been raped, you might say, oh, that's so sad, but you would probably never talk to them about it, right? If you find out that somebody was a child prodigy and you saw her sing like an opera singer at the age of 5 on YouTube, you might share that with someone else, right? But you'd probably forget her name. Just go on with your life. Things that we don't know about scare us. My friend, Sister Michelle in Florida, told me that's why I was scared of snakes. She said if I lived in Africa, I would not be scared of snakes because I would have been playing with them since I was a child. Now, I'm not sure she's accurate here. I'm not sure. All right, so we know who he is, and we know that he asked Jesus not to send them into the swine. And, of course, Jesus gave Legion, the demons, permission. And then the people came out to see what happened. They find the man from whom the demons had gone sitting at the feet of Jesus, clothed and in his right mind. And I would expect that next sentence to say, and they were overjoyed. They ordered deli platters. They welcomed him and said, you can hang out, you can couch surf among all of us till we find you a home. This is a man who to them had been dead and is now alive. But what it actually says is, and they were afraid. People get comfortable with our own solutions to these kind of societal problems. That is why for years and years, people were committed to to mental hospitals. And we know that what went on in those mental hospitals was anything but holy sometimes, right? But we figured it was for their own good, and at least they wouldn't hurt themselves or someone else. What caused us to move from treating them that way to bringing them into hospitals, to coming up with programs, anonymous programs and things where families and friends and communities could learn how to help mentally ill people, how to talk to them, how to include them, how to protect them, and how to protect themselves. That's where we are now, and that's a far cry from locking everyone up, right? I believe that is the power of God working in the collective of people to bring about love and compassion for those on the margins. Why? Because that's what God does. That's what God's Holy Spirit does. There are 6 families in this congregation, 6 families who have in their immediate family a transgendered child or a transgendered adult. Maybe that surprises you. It surprised me when I started adding them up. Why? Because I've been here 6.5 years, and I've just this last year or two have had people come and confide this in me, always when we're alone. It's not easy to talk about. I'm talking about it now because the more we talk about it, the more we normalize it, and the less alone the people feel when they come, and the less alone their families feel in trying to love them in ways that they didn't expect to love them, right? The last thing I want to do is give you this story to hold in your head, because we tend to remember stories, and then I will link it to what Jesus does for us and for all people. I might have told you this before, but it's such a good metaphor. When we were moving so that I could attend seminary from Heartland, Michigan to Columbus, Ohio, and the house was full of boxes, and it was we lived high up in the trees like I always seem to do. And Chase was taking a nap, and he was 3 years old, and there was so much dust that the fire alarm in the house went off. And he climbed out of his crib, opened the door, ran down the hall, past all the adults, down the stairs, out the front door, all the way out to the mailbox, which is like a 1/4 mile of lawn, and stood under the tree, because that was the plan. And nobody followed him. Because we all knew, oh no, Chase, it's just going off because of the dust. There's not actually a fire. And to this day, I kind of feel sad in my heart. Why? Because this little guy did the right thing, and nobody stood with him, because we knew there was no fire. So I ended up going out. Why? Because I'm the mom here, and the dad's sleeping, but I digress. I went after him, and as we walked back in, he kept saying, but it was the plan. But this was the plan. This was the plan, Mom. And I have assured him that if we are ever in a building and that happens again, whether it's a false alarm or true, you can find me by the tree waiting for him. What does Jesus do with this outcast? This person whom pastors for centuries have called mentally ill, confusing it with being demon-possessed. This is what Jesus does. He asks, "What is your name?" He does what is necessary to cure the man. He casts out the demons. He then sits with the man and talks to him. We know this because that's how the people find him. He's in his right mind. And then when the man wants to go with him, Jesus says, no. Go and tell the good news of what God has done. Notice when the people ask Jesus to leave, Jesus doesn't argue with them. Jesus doesn't try to explain why it might be a good thing if I hung around here for a little bit, right? That's not part of what Jesus does, and it's not part of what we do. We find out people's names. We do what we can to help them heal. We sit with them. And then we tell the good news of how we were blessed to meet someone on the margins who we understand better because we spent time with them and we were not afraid.
a stranger.
We better have time. Wait a minute. I'm going to put this on before I so, Andrew,